I'd like to introduce Amina Kadous. She's one of our Sheikh Thani project awardees for 2023. So Amina, I'd like to just start off by asking a little bit about you, about how you started in photography and your earliest memories of photography.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so happy to be awarded this for the project. And it's a pleasure to be with you, Maryam, and it's also an honor to be awarded such a prestigious award. So I'll kind of travel back a bit to talk about my early days of photography, because I think I started photographing in 2018. But I think this even goes way before that. Talking like when I was thinking about my early memories of photography, it really kind of hit back to my childhood days. I remember quite well my mother used to document every moment and every memory when we were kids. And I believe our generation, or the generation of millennials, we were probably the last ones to have family albums and created that. And that was up until the early 2000s. And so in a way, my memory with photography was not really about the photograph, but it was about being photographed, which really changed much now, because I think when I grew old, I realized the importance of these photographs. And so when I started in 2018, that was when I discovered my grandfather's archives. And since then, I started to really look at the photograph more as a memory and see how it really shapes a lot of my own imagination, and how I'm trying to also reimagine myself with everything happening around me today. And so here comes the importance of the photograph itself as a material object that helps us uncover so much of what has been lost. And so it was more of a tool that preserved my memories and helped me reimagine them in a different context. And so when I started photographing, it was pretty much my journey really started kind of in parallel with my fascination with the recurring changes of my city, Cairo. And with so much changes happening around me, I felt the urge to cope with that rapid change instantly and try to, in a way, I was racing with time, and I felt the urge and the need to start searching for the stories that we might lose later. And also search for the places and the landmarks and the historic places that shaped my ancestors' past. And so I came to see all these changes and how each one of us reacted differently and very personally. And so in a way, photography for me became that tool that immortalizes and paused life. And so here I was behind the camera more and kind of guiding myself and in a way narrating the story through my own lens. And so I would have to say that there happened this pause from 2010 until 2015, and that was the time when I traveled abroad to study, and I came back to a city that has completely changed. And so the camera really was a tool that helped me reintroduce me to the city that changed over the past few years. And so here the camera was in a way that tool that gave me the excuse to enter people's homes, to connect with the people, connect with the places that I've been away from. And so also when I discovered my grandfather's archives, I was trying to reimagine these archives in today's history and create that link between the past and the present. And so from then, the journey kind of unraveled, and the journey became more of trying to situate myself and see myself and how do I fit in the stories of my past and the stories of my ancestors, and specifically look at concepts of memory, identity, and the concept of loss as well, and how we react to loss, because I lost my grandparents when I was traveling abroad, and so that kind of created that gap. And so also the camera became that tool that kind of became a healing tool as well. And in a way, I started to kind of appreciate its value and the value of documenting the now, because in a matter of seconds, everything becomes history. And so I saw how the camera really, in a way, also writes history in its own medium.
Yeah. Can I ask what you studied?
I studied fine art and sociology, a double major. And so
So
in a
it
way,
wasn't so far off that from
yeah, but my pathway was pretty much talking about the use of media and art and kind of and how it affects society, and how art is a tool of change in a way. And so when I came back, I was unconsciously driven by that, and driven by the fact that the documentation is important. And so and even I did a project because I was away. I didn't really experience a lot of the changes that the country has been going through. So I've been trying to express that even during my school days with projects. And so I was looking at different types of documentation. And so it's so interesting how I did, like I wasn't using photography as my main medium during my school days until I came back to Cairo. And then I realized the importance of the camera, because it was such a quick tool to kind of capture that change and just instantly just frame a scene and kind of cherish it over the years. And this is what I also realized looking at my grandfather's archives as well, is that I didn't really know anything about that until he passed away. And so when I found his archives, in a way, I was living in his life without him being there. So I reimagined him writing me a letter through his past. And so from these archives came out so many stories and so many narratives that I started to reimagine. And from that also came my own questions. And so I was always kind of, in a way, obsessed by the past and the history. And so I started to question that. It's like, why am I so attached to a past that really I didn't live, but at the same time, I kind of lived through the people of the past and through the memories of their memories. And so from here kind of unraveled a lot of kind of artistic projects, from which kind of came out White Gold.
Did you find your answer to why you have this fascination through this project?
I think I realized that I don't accept change that easily. And so across the years, I've been trying to document that change because I can't accept it. And so one of the reasons that helped me accept it was to be part of it. So I just I started to look at how I can, in a way, change is part of life. So I have to accept it. And so the camera was that tool that helped me kind of, over the years, accept that. And so it also became that tool that also gradually helped me preserve what I know I will lose. And so from that came that project as well, because the project of White Gold is mainly talking about questioning my own identity and how it changed over the years. And so I looked at myself. So through the story, I'm interweaving my personal, family, and national histories in a story of the history of Egyptian cotton, documenting our fading fabrics, culture, and symbols of the past through my grandfather's archives. So in a way, I'm questioning changes in the Egyptian farmer's identity, the life story of my city, Al-Mahalla Al-Kubra, myself, and what makes us who we are. And so here the project depicts a collective struggle to exist, to record and internalize our memories in a personal attempt to keep our stories alive and helping us how we view ourselves and our national history. So as much as it was a story about me, it was really also a story about those people, about the farmers, about the community, and about us as a collective memory. And so the story really emerged from multiple trips to my family's farm in Mahalla, and not only that, but also to my family's house. And from that house really kind of unraveled a lot of stories. And so in a way, it was kind of that internal tension of doubt and questioning my own identity in the midst of the larger context of my altered national identity and about the changes. And so here the cotton in the story is my history and my childhood memories as well. So in one of the pictures, I'm kind of holding on to the cotton. And so here the cotton is pretty much that thing that I don't want to let go of. And so here we look at that picture, Warda, she's one of the main chaperones who helps in the cotton harvest. And so for me, I saw myself also reflected in these characters, in a way trying to hold on to something that's we're losing over the past few years. But at the same time, it's something that's very rooted in our tradition. And so not only that, but it's also been one of the largest industries we have in Egypt. And so I've been trying to, through that story, to kind of tell a personal story within the larger story. And so also in a way, observing my historical and current family ties, there is kind of this one element that provides me with a sense of belonging, that I am of others, and that this feeling of connection with my family in Egypt's past is something that really holds me and grounds me so much. And so, so the story kind of really is pretty much quite a long-term project, and so it's filled with so much layers. So when I started the story, it was really just one question. It's like, what does it mean to be Egyptian? And so I realized how this question is pretty much the history of Egypt, because being Egyptian is multi-layered as well. It's being Egyptian doesn't mean you're one thing, but it's a lot of layers, like being through the past, like being occupied by so many civilizations and so many nationalities as well. And so here the cotton is this, it's a seed that was discovered by a French man that later presented it to Muhammad Ali, who later planted it. And then in the late 1800s, when the American Civil War erupted, the British had to turn to Egypt for their cotton supplies. And that was when the occupation happened, and then Egypt became occupied by the British. And basically Egypt turned to a huge cotton plantation farm. And so it was not until the early 1900s that Egypt kind of created its own industrial facility that was also run by the colonial period during the British, but at the same time, it was kind of like a nationalistic movement to claim our own identity. And so after the post-colonial era was also another phase of cotton as well, kind of in a way using cotton as a lucrative weapon. And so after that as well, during the 70s and 80s, a lot of policies changed, which kind of also affected the plantation of the cotton plantations as well. So in a way, the story has, I'm trying to tell the story also through different political eras as well, and through different social eras as well. And so my ancestors, all my family from my father's side were all working in the cotton business. Kind of going back to my great-grandfather, who was one of the early merchants of cotton in the city of Mahalla. And the city of Mahalla has always been known as the city of cotton and cotton harvest. And so he was one of the early traders, and then came my grandfather after him in 1969, founding our cotton textile factory. And then later my father took over in the late 80s. And so I'm the fourth generation that really kind of didn't see the rise, but saw the decline. And so through that story, I'm also talking about that struggle to exist and to record these memories, and to kind of dig so much of the history that's quite unknown and quite kind of buried, because cotton is pretty much a colonial, it's a colonial subject and a colonial crop as well. So here in that story, I'm talking about that kind of deconstructing that colonial era and seeing how we've been affected by it and how we affect it now. And so yeah, it's a multi-generational story, and it's a multi-layered story as well, kind of interweaving the archives as well. So yeah.
So do you include the archives within your project?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there's quite a, I mean, in that picture, here's my grandfather's suit, and it's 100% Egyptian cotton from the Mahalla Spinning and Weaving Factory, which is the first industrial facility to be built in Egypt and in most of Africa in the early 1900s. And it was built in 1927 and founded by the economist Talat Harb. And so this factory has been known until now producing mainly products that are just 100% Egyptian cotton. And so it was so fascinating for me to also find not just here in that project, when I'm talking about archives, I'm not just talking about photographs, but I'm talking about also the material object itself, an object. And so here also my aunt is another main character in the story, because she's also the voice of the past, and she's the one who recalls so much of her memories with her father, which is my grandfather as well. And so she kind of tells me how the city of Mahalla was back then, because she also saw the glorious days of Mahalla. And here she's sitting in my my grandparents' room, kind of reminiscing about the past. And so, yeah, that's also another layer. And here, that's a self-portrait of me. And that's actually one of in that story, I really had to confront myself in a way, the camera. And here was the portrait I was telling you about, where I'm holding on to that childhood memory, the cotton, and kind of trying not to let go of that past and that history.
Yeah.
Thank
you for sharing the project. Now that you're at this stage of the project, I know that you mentioned that it's a long-term project and that you're integrating archives, objects, your own images. They're so beautifully photographed as well. They're sort of like art images on their own right as well. How do you imagine that you're going to... I saw that in the proposal that you sent that you'd like to turn it into a book and to do that. But I mean, when do you think it will reach that end stage, of this long-term project? And when do you arrive at that point where you think, okay, this is complete, this is ready to be a book?
I think the hardest question is to always ask ourselves, like, when are we going to be finishing this project, or when does an artwork finish? And so I think for me in that project, I would say I'm in the last phase of it, because I've been lucky enough to document a lot of places that I have been are in the phase of changing. And so I think I'm currently in the final chapter of kind of wrapping the story up, working on the last chapter, which is documenting the cotton in Alexandria. And I think I would say that probably by the end of this year, I'll be finishing the project and starting to work on the book, because I think a story as such needs to kind of be documented and kind of living beyond me, kind of just passing on and moving beyond my own narrative. And I think this is the power of personal narratives, that it touches upon each one of us, and it talks about larger story. And so it's that struggle. It's like, when will I finish? But I think I'm in the last phase of it, because it also comes with a lot of kind of how do I say, it's like energy, it's you kind of, each project has its own spirit and energy. And so now I'm in the last phase of it.
You can see that you're integrating so much of the Egyptian psyche and what it means to be Egyptian, that I think many people will learn sometimes. Like, it seems like there's a lot of research that's gone into also about the cotton industry and about the history, that maybe someone is learning about themselves, others see themselves in it, and just those layers that you've been able to create with this project are
and I think one thing about that project as well, or mainly with how I work with photography specifically, is that for me the photograph is really one layer that's part of a larger story. And so, for example, in the project White Gold, I'm working with cotton, handmade cotton paper, and so I'm using the cotton fibers to create paper and print on the paper itself. So that's also another layer of the story that's kind of taking time with me, because here I'm not just also documenting, but I'm working also as an artist, trying to create artworks from these photographs. And so so also something that's kind of taking time in that project is me making sure to kind of fully feel that I'm kind of, I want to accomplish and make sure that all the layers in that story are kind of complete, and tell the story the best way I want it to be told.
Yeah, that's actually such an important part of the photographic practice that we sometimes forget, is this part of the end result, like the paper matters, the way that you print it matters, and I think that's
I think
really interesting that you're going to use cotton and test the cotton as well to print.
I'm actually really this is one of the exciting parts about this project, is to kind of look at the photograph in a different context and on a different surface as well, in a way deconstructing the image and trying to maximize the use of it as well.
Amazing. And could you tell us about maybe a few other projects, or like what's next for you after this large long-term project? Are your projects quite similar in the way that you maybe interrogate your own history and the history of your environment, or are your projects quite different to each other?
So really, pretty much most of my projects kind of touch upon each other in terms of the concept itself, of the historical concepts of archives, or the concept of memory, the concept of loss. And so I would say that each project is birthed from the one before it. It's like at the beginning of the beginning, or like in a way, the beginning of a new chapter. And so most of, like, for example, I one of my early projects, which I'm always kind of happy to talk about, because it's really looking at the photograph as completely different. And so it started, that project was in 2018, and this was an installation that took a month and a half. And after the month and a half, the installation is put down and it's not there anymore. And so in that installation, that was actually during the year when I discovered my grandfather's archives. And so the name of the project was If My Grandfather Had Written Me a Letter. And so in that installation, I pretty much got all the archives, the real archives, and created that kind of like a time machine, transporting my family's house in Mahalla to an old room inside an old apartment in downtown Cairo that was part of the Of Something Else Biennale in 2018. And so I recreated that space, that space of my grandparents, in another space. And I allowed people to interact with the space itself, to remember their own memories and to write letters to their past. So in this installation, it was in a way recreating the room and recreating the image. So I was looking at when I was creating that room, I in a way I was composing the image. So you would look at the room as one complete image, but in a way each furniture was a fragment. It's like looking at the photograph and decomposing each pixel of the photograph. And so so I would invite the audience in the room, and there was a corner where there would be postcards and they would write letters, and then as they walk out, they would throw it in a mailbox, not knowing where it would land. And so here I'm also talking about the concept of time. Usually when you write a letter, you're mailing it to the future. But in this specific moment, you're writing from the present to the past. And so, and in a way, trying to rethink about certain moments or memories. Not just that, but also you could write to an object, to a place, to someone, you know. And so, I think in this project, this was one of the early projects that really kind of gave me and made me understand the importance of personal narratives, because that was one of the first projects where I really was opening up so much about myself and my family, and that's not really something that's in our culture that's pretty much accepted, you know.
Yeah, that's true. It's not easy to open up archives or open up things about the family to the public in our culture. So for you to be able to do that and navigate that in a way that is artistic, is very sensitive, but also vulnerable, is really beautiful to see as well, in that sense. Yeah. So I think just to end, I'd like to ask you about, you know, as تصوير, we're a young festival. We've just started. It's our third year of the award and our second year of the festival. And our whole approach is to support the communities in the WANA region, Western Asia, North Africa, and to build these communities of support and to have a better festival each year. So what advice would you give for us as a festival, and what you'd like to see more of, what support you'd like, and how we can, you know, support photographers as a festival as well?
I think I would say two things. The first thing is really, as a photography festival, I think it's very important to create a platform for artists to connect and show their work. This is one of the most important things, to allow that platform. Not just that, but also to allow for more artistic talks, conversations, tours, and larger discussions related to like timely topics that are very important throughout the years. And I think also the second thing, and I think this is something that we lack in our region, is to understand and be aware that a photograph is an art form and it's an art medium. And so to help people kind of change their view of photograph, that it's really not just, because I think our history with photography is pretty much dates to the history of photojournalism and specifically our region. And I think we passed this so much. And we need to start looking at a photograph and helping people acquire it as an art form and creating this access to them and helping them understand that it's really, a photograph is like a painting, you know, it's pretty much a painting, but with a different medium. So yeah, I think those are two important factors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this recognition, even with our artistic director, Charlotte Cotton, you know, she worked in the UK and in California in the United States. And I think even there, the struggle of having photography stand in its own right is not easy, you know, and it's about how do we build these conversations? How do we build the wa'i and like the awareness of, you know, photography is its own right as a medium and as an artwork. And I think the more projects that we receive, like yours, you know, where you can really see how it is an artwork and it's not just photojournalism, it's really helping build that for people, and to see like when they see the exhibitions or when they see your book or the outcome, they really see, oh, like this is actually an artwork and it's not just images on a wall that are showing something, you know. I think that is very helpful.
Well, yeah, I'm really wishing you the best, and I think having such a big festival is important for us in our region, because I think this is also something we don't pretty much have a lot of. So I think having that space is important.
Yeah, we need to find ways of connecting and supporting photographers locally, but also regionally. And I like the idea of the platform. I think it's important as well to be able to connect with the other photographers and to learn from each other. Well, thank you so much, Amina.
Thank you, Maryam. Thank you.
Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to say, but otherwise it was a lovely conversation and great for you to share your project. And I'm sure people will see more of your project in the next coming years as well.
Thank you for your time, really. It was a lovely discussion. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.